Hello, my dear friends. It's another week, and we are here to spice up your day. uh, Hello. What are you laughing about?
I don't know that laugh I did.
It was quite amazing, honestly.
Oh, goodness.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another riveting episode of Restitching the Tapestry. Wow, the alliteration I have going on today.
I love
Welcome
it.
back to welcome back to Restitching the Tapestry. It is Thursday, May 2nd, 2024. And it's kind of hard to believe that we're in May already, but here we are.
The days just keep on coming.
The days just keep on coming and going. And we are on episode 157, which is pretty exciting, right? Tonight's episode will be Being a Martyr, so we will have a lot of ample time to unpack that. But before we get to that, how have we been? What have we been up to? Ari, what have you been doing?
Oh my goodness. I've had such a crazy week. I have dug deep into the world of nerdfighteria, into the Hank and John Green world. Not that I haven't been a nerd fighter for years and years and years, but like every so often I just like dip my toes into the world of nerdfighteria. And so like I'll read a John or Hank book, or like I'll just kind of like interact with the community. And so I think the last real time I was like into nerdfighteria was probably like during the pandemic. And so that was kind of like the last real time I like dipped my toes into all of that. But every time I dip my toes in, I get real excited because like it stimulates me mentally and just gets me like really excited about stuff. I wrote a 9-page essay for giggles this week. And this is during my final project week for my class, which I got an A on, an A+ on, by the way.
Iconic.
I was just like, I was like, if I wake up early and I write my final paper, which I wrote my final paper in 2 hours, which was a 13-page paper, I can have time to read 3 books for this essay that I'm doing for fun. And I'll just get it done today. And so I read 3 books in a day. And then the next day I wrote the essay, but I would have written it that night. But I was like, no, I really should sleep.
Wait, did you say that you wrote a 13-page essay in 2 hours?
I did, yes. And I got an A+ on it.
Are you a superhero? Like,
no, just slightly panic.
That's when you know that we're most productive, is when we're slightly manic. Oh my goodness. I mean, that sounds fun though.
I've had to come down. Like today I was finally coming down, and I was like, I can't post as much as I have been posting because I've been like posting like a lot. And so I was like, I gotta bring it down. I'm saying like really amazing, like really like insightful stuff. But at the same time, I'm like, I gotta bring it down to human level.
Speaking of which, congratulations. Ari's YouTube channel, Tarot Time with Ari, just hit 1,300 subscribers.
It did. I filmed during all of this chaos. I also filmed all of my dailies for May, which was 31-minute videos. So I was doing all of this other stuff, and then I took time out to film all of that to my filming schedule for like, oh my goodness, I need to slow it down.
Oh my god. Well, okay, so now at least you're at a slower pace, right? You're like, okay, catching breath now, we're good. That actually so believe it or not, this happened to me early in the week because last week was my last week of the semester. So, like, I got everything done by, like, Saturday. Sunday, I ceased to exist the
Yeah,
entire day. So, it was, like, my rest day. And then Monday, I hit the ground like a monster truck.
yeah.
And I, like, did my scheduling for Growing Up with Godzilla. I did some, like, note stuff for this. What else did I do? I did some writing. I then spent the entire afternoon gardening. I transplanted 80 tomato plants.
That's intense.
We have 80 tomato plants. I don't know what we're gonna do with 80 tomato plants, but we're gonna can some salsas and sauces, and it's gonna be a good old time.
Bipolar gang represent.
Did you just say bipolar gay?
No, bipolar gang represent.
Oh, I thought you said bipolar gay represent. I mean the accuracy.
We could be bipolar gay friends together.
Wonder Manic Twin powers activate.
Wonder. Oh, sorry. Other side. Other side.
Wait, let's do it again.
Wow.
Oh, we're terrible. We're terrible. In all realness, though, everybody, we are doing fine. I know we're joking about mania, but we are doing fine.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm only slightly. If the most I do during my hypomanic stage is I read books and I write essays, my therapist said it's probably fine.
well, and the thing is, like, we've gotten to the point in our lives where we've learned to kind of joke about it too, right? So I think there's a healthy level of humor in it that is fun.
And I know when I need to like reel it in.
Right, right. But let's be honest, everybody. Ari and I have had a very productive week in very different ways, but very interesting and fun ways.
Right.
So,
So what besides the tomato plants have you been doing this week?
let's see. Honestly, mostly that. Like, we did a lot of cleaning. We had some family over. I've been like, obviously now that the semester's over with, I've been kind of like switching at my pace. Like, I've been trying to have like some quiet time. I know that, and that probably sounds very strange, but quiet time for me is just me staring catatonically at a television while trashy reality TV is taking place.
Might I suggest the new Turtles All the Way Down movie from John Green on Max?
Okay, I like that's actually a perfect segue into the current event snapshot. So, I have not watched that yet. Talk about it, Ari.
Okay, so that's what I wrote the essay about is the Turtles All the Way Down book because I read it before the movie came out. But the movie is out this week and it has to do, it's very mental illness related because John Green has OCD. So he wrote a
Hmm.
book about a character who has OCD. So the movie really kind of delves into a character that is struggling with and has kind of a mental health crisis during the course of the story.
Mm.
Where they go through things like depersonalization, and just where they have mental health struggles where they're not sure whether or not they should take medication, and whether or not that changes them as a human being. You know, am I still me if I take medication, or am I the product of the medication? Am I still,
Ah.
still who I am, whether or not I take medication, things like that. So it's a young person struggling with their identity, whether or not they take that medication and things like that. And so I think that everybody should watch it if you have ever had a mental health struggle, because I think that it's very relatable and I think that it's very good. And I think that it made me cry because as somebody who has been hospitalized and seen that degradation of your mental health, it felt very relatable.
Oh. You know that like I that piques my interest significantly, especially on the medication front, because like for a long time, like when I was in medication, like it was a really hard decision to make because part of what held me back was like this fear of that it would change me as a person or it would make me unable to be creative, right?
Right.
And the truth is, like, I mean, I made the decision best for myself and did what I needed to do and realized that I was fine. But, like, everyone's journey is different. And I think that having stories like that where we have that mental health representation is just as important as physical health representation, right?
It's true.
And if we look at mental health representation in media, it's not always the best.
And this is a really good representation of mental health.
Okay, good. That's good. So, what else on the current event snapshot? It looks like Arizona governor repeals ban on most abortions. Interesting.
So it's an old bill that goes back to the 1800s. They repealed a ban that so people are starting to be able to get abortions in, well, not yet, but they just repealed it. So it goes back to the 1800s that you couldn't get most types of abortions that from this bill that went back to like a long time ago. So they're changing the laws in Arizona, and that's kind of a big win.
Oh, wow, good. Good. So, what other things did we have going on this week? I've been out of the loop with the news. I've been in a garden. I've been in a greenhouse.
Today, and I was surprised at a lot of things that happened today. There was a telephone call that was heard by jurors in the Trump case where he was talking about the specifics of the bribery case, and he was talking about like all of the money that he was like, like how much do we have to pay them to make this go away? And that's what he said on the phone call. And jurors heard that today, so it was kind of like a really damning phone call that like had gotten recorded and like was being shared with jurors about, and it's sort of like, ooh, is this the nail on the coffin? Is it really happening? Is he really gonna get it this time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's been getting a lot of traction too, I saw.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the next few months are definitely going to be interesting in the political front, especially considering we have an election coming up this year too.
Yeah.
So
there was also a protest that was on across campuses, but there was a huge protest on the UCLA campus for pro-Palestine protests. And I hadn't heard anything about this, but all of a sudden, like 2,000 students got arrested on the UCLA campus for pro-Palestine, trying to get them to something about the Gaza Strip, but they're trying to. It's basically just trying to with the war in.
Isn't it to try to like bring attention to the fact that there's also a humanitarian crisis, or I mean, technically, when you think about it, a genocide taking place? Like,
yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that it's happening across hundreds of college campuses. In fact, there was another news report I saw the other day where, I think it was yesterday, where professors at I think it's a university in New York joined student protesters because there was police involvement, against the student protesters, and the faculty all lined up and locked arms to protect the students. A very significant sign of solidarity, but like clearly a message is being sent, right?
Yeah.
I mean, one cannot deny the fact that, regardless one's perspective with what's happening over there, like the fact that this horrible of a humanitarian crisis has been happening and nothing has really been done is very glaring.
I do support the humanitarian efforts against what's happening to the citizens of in Gaza, in Palestine. I don't believe that citizens should be attacked or targeted in this.
Right.
But the thing about it is I do not support Hamas in that respect. And the thing about it is it's very hard to not want to. So I support the fact that I don't want them to target Hamas, but I don't want them to target civilians as well. So it's very difficult in my opinion that,
Yeah. Well, it's also difficult being that there's also been a rise in anti-Semitism too. Right?
And that's why it's hard for me to want to support the pro-Palestine movement, because it seems as though there's a lot of anti-Semitism around the pro-Palestine movement, and that it seems as though there's a lot of anti-Semitism around it, and so it's very difficult for me because
it's such a complex. It's very complex. I think that's
So I do support the humanitarian efforts of not targeting civilians, but at the same time, I also do support the Jewish community. So it's very difficult for me.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. I totally get that. So, but yeah, those protests are probably going to continue going on, for until further notice. So we'll keep an eye out on that and let you all know if we hear anything else. So
Yeah.
now the last current event snapshot is kind of something funny that's trending on
Social
TikTok
media.
specifically.
Oh, is it TikTok?
Oh yeah, it's been really going on TikTok. Ari, do you want to describe it? What's been going on?
Oh my goodness. So apparently there was a question about if a woman were alone in the woods and she were approached, would she rather be approached by a man alone in the woods or a bear? And men were getting upset and surprised that most women said they would rather become upon by a bear than a lone man in the woods. And it's sort of like, because the idea is that men are more dangerous than bears in the woods. And so to me it makes more sense, because you have a guy. Bears have behaviors and routines, and so you think, like, if you meet a bear in the woods, unless you have food, you can give the bear the food and then just run in the other direction. It's not going to chase after you. And it doesn't want
Hmm.
to, it just wants to eat. It has these instincts. It has nothing to do with you. But you meet a guy in the woods, you don't know what their intentions are, what they want. Um, they
Yeah.
more erratic. They have what their motivations are, what they're going to do. There's a lot of unknowns about meeting somebody alone in the woods, and what their intentions are, or what they could do. And you're alone. They're bigger than you. Especially as a woman, like, they could be bigger,
Yeah.
they could be stronger than you, they could be more dangerous than you.
Hmm.
Like, meeting a man alone in the woods seems terrifying to me. Just
If
the
you
idea.
holler loud enough, a bear will heed boundaries, whereas
They punch the
oftentimes,
bear in the face and they'll probably walk away from you. But
right,
as a woman, it's hard to punch a man in the face and they'll just walk away.
right. Jackie's here. Jackie says, a bear.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'd much rather run into a bear.
Also, Arpy's here. Arpy, I'm sorry that you've been sick all week. I hope you
Oh,
feel
and thanks for the
better.
congratulations. I just saw you said congratulations on the 1300.
Woohoo! Well, we wanted to end on a lighthearted current event snapshot for that segment. So, are we ready for the mission statement?
Yes, and it's your turn.
It's my turn. Okay, here we go. We live in a dynamic society where social media shapes us by creating greater opportunities for connection. It has led to a developing understanding of the adversity many marginalized communities face, the powers causing the adversity, and those who act as bystanders as atrocities take place in real time. Our goal with this show is to make connections and have challenging conversations about social topics, current events, pop culture, and art. Together, let's weave the threads of understanding with what privilege we have in order to learn, educate, and create in a world that's growing.
Woo!
Woo! Arpy says, I'm doing better, almost 100%. And Tiffany Gray is here. Hello, Tiffany, my dear. It's good to see you. Oh, Arpy comments and praying hands. Uh,
Aw.
thank you for taking up Leo's mantle and pointing that out. Leo's not been here in a while. So, oh my goodness, tonight's episode is talking about being a martyr. And this has been an interesting topic that we wanted to talk about for a long while, because, I mean, I think it kind of blends into a whole variety of other different intersections when we like talk about mental health and relationships, so on and so forth. So hopefully it'll be a pretty interesting conversation. Well, not hopefully, it's us. We know it's going to be an interesting conversation.
I know that I have done this in my 20s at least once or twice, where
Oh,
I have been, because we all are the hero of our own stories, and we have all been the martyr at least once.
When I was in my early 20s, I basically had a PhD in martyrdom. And it was very toxic, and I'm pretty excited to talk about it because I've not unpacked that until like therapy the last 4 years. So, but okay, so let's define what a martyr is first. So, according to Merriam-Webster, a martyr is, quote, a person who sacrifices something of great value and especially life itself for the sake of principle, right? So, I mean, throughout history, there have been some very famous martyrs who have like affected social change or historical change. Joan of Arc, for example, Jesus Christ in the Bible was very much considered a martyr. Um, more recently, public figures like Dr. Martin Luther King in the Civil Rights Movement, Matthew Shepard in the late 90s, like his death, like both of them were kind of inadvertent martyrs because their deaths kind of very much stoked social change, in an outcry against that atrocity that happened to those individuals, right? And we'll be talking about that a bit, of course, but we'll be talking about, martyrdom in a variety of other ways. So, I guess my first question for you, Ari, and I don't even think we have this on the list, but this is an interesting question. When were you first introduced to the concept of martyrdom in your life?
um, well, if you talk about like Jesus, the idea of being a martyr, and I don't necessarily ever think that being I suppose like being a martyr was presented to me originally as like this altruistic thing that like Jesus, when I was like 5 or 6 years old, we talk about Jesus and he's this like, selfless person who carries the cross through the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. And he's tortured and he's whipped and he's beaten
Mm.
and he's carrying this heavy wooded cross and he's crossing the desert and he's torturing himself for the benefit of humanity, and he's holding all of humanity on his back, and he's doing it for all of our sins, and he's dying for us, he's doing
Mm-hmm.
it for you.
And holding steadfast to principles despite naysayers. And
Yeah.
no, that was kind of like my first exposure too. And like I would argue and I was in doing some research on like different definitions of martyr. Like the definition that I gave is actually the second definition listed on Merriam-Webster. The first definition has everything to do with remaining steadfast to principles in light of persecution or religious persecution. So
Right.
martyrdom, like the term martyr is very much, religious and politically centered, like in its definition itself. Um, and like, yeah, I would say that like that first figment of martyrdom was, especially for me, Jesus Christ. And then when I learned about Joan of Arc as well,
Yeah.
like leading this, revolution and, I think it was the 100-Year War, if memory serves me correctly. And then of being captured by opposing forces and being executed ultimately, right? That it like many people revere Joan of Arc as being like a martyr at the very same self-sacrificial level.
I don't think I learned about Joan of Arc until later, until I was like probably like 9 or 10, because I was Catholic. So I learned about the Catholic saints.
Mm-hmm.
Catholic, become a Catholic saint, you have to be tortured and you have to die in some like horrific, usually a horrific way as well. There was like Saint Christopher and things, but usually like saints. A lot of the saints they died because they were tortured in the same way or
Many
persecuted.
of which considered martyrs themselves.
Yeah,
Themselves,
like
yeah.
a lot of the saints, so I knew about a lot of the Christian saints being tortured and killed in horrific ways. And so like I I hear you go to Bible study, or you go to Sunday school or something, or for me it was Wednesday night. My mom would drop me off and they would give you these little booklets. You'd have little snacks You sit around, you open up the booklet, and it'd be like these little blank pages, and be like, okay, we're doing Bible study, and be like, let's learn about the saints today. And we would fill out these little booklets, and they would have
Right.
little pictures, and you would just like go through, because it was like for catechism. And so we would be learning about the saints, or we'd be doing Bible stories, and we would progress through each of these like little like booklets about, and
Mm-hmm.
we had to do all the stations of the cross.
Yeah, I remember this too. RP says, "How about Emmett Till?" I would say, like, yeah, like especially in recent history, there are a lot of individuals who, were murdered, and that created like a significant social outcry as a result. Lagiacris, hey Lagiacris, how are you? It's good to see you.
Hey, homie.
Going back, okay, so this kind of like connects with a thread from last episode talking about like being LGBTQ plus and navigating, just difficult religious history. But I remember as a kid being in these Bible studies, and like the fact that like we would focus so much on like the torture and death, and like the and of course like all of these like devotionals and pamphlets would have like these artistic renderings of like people being like brutally bludgeoned.
Or like set on fire.
And I'm just like, this is like, as a 6-year-old, like, do I need to be seeing this?
It's not that it's like necessarily a bad thing, but like it's definitely like I grew
Oh,
up and I was
I had
like, I look back
nightmares
at that
about
and
that
I'm
kind of
like, you
thing.
definitely learned about people being set on fire or being mauled by like lions and things like that. Or like,
Ari, I had nightmares. Like, I was like, am I going to be bludgeoned? Like, is this like I was really torn between the fear of being bludgeoned and being like, ooh, hot Jesus.
Bible, Old Testament Bible, where they talk about a lot of these like old stories about like, all, or remember the story about like Lot, and he takes his family out of the city, and they just like destroy the whole city.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Just think about like all of that.
Um, Did
Uh,
you ever, this is a random segue. Did you ever watch um like the late 90s movies like Prince of Egypt and
yes, talk about martyrdom.
Moses very much? But let's acknowledge that Moses was also very hot in that film.
He definitely had the six pack going on.
And like I kind of consider the Prince of Egypt as very specific gay film viewing because also Mariah Carey and Whitney Houston do a duet for that film. But anyway,
Do you remember the media with Donny Osmond doing the the coats? What was that?
yes, the coats of many colors, right? Tiffany. Oh, hello, Vegan Mama's here. Vegan Mama's one of my very good friends. Christina, how are you?
Oh,
Tiffany says, I don't think those dark things should be taught to small children. Maybe later in life. Yeah, like I think maybe like as a teenager, it might be a little bit more applicable. But you would think that at a younger age, the more altruistic things would be better.
they're trying to put the fear of morality into children, so they talk about the death and dying and the martyrdom and like the
Right.
gushy things.
Right, absolutely. Vegan Mama says, "I'm so glad I saw that." See, I'm glad that some people view our Facebook page. P.S. Restitching the Tapestry has its own Facebook page. We'll give it a like, please. And you're doing great. That's good. That's good.
Oh, good.
So, I mean, okay, we've been talking about martyrdom in such huge fashion. So the next question is, does being a martyr need to be grandiose or can it manifest subtly?
Yeah, like that's the thing is like people, so there's this idea, you have like Jesus and you have like Joan of Arc or you have like Dr. Martin Luther King, who are these like great figures in history who are these martyrs who have like suffered and tortured themselves and been tortured by society. So people get this idea in their head that being a martyr is somehow this like altruistic great thing. And so what they do
Mhm.
is they want to turn themselves into martyrs because they think that they want to emulate these people. But the thing about it is martyrs don't ask to be martyrs.
Right. You don't like it's not like a permission thing. It just kind of tends to fall in their lap, right?
For me, if you are trying to be a martyr, you just have a BDSM kink.
RP says, how is it okay to teach kids that but not being queer? Good point. Tiffany says, I don't think Jesus should ever be used as a weapon or to put the fear of death in people, let alone innocent children. Agree 1000%. And it looks like both Christina and RP agree as well with that. Tiffany's like, oh my god, Ari, you're too funny.
Is it not true though? If you are not asking to be tortured by other people, if you're not asking to be abused by other people, like, oh, I'm such a victim. People are making me, like, oh, I'm doing this for the benefit of other people. Are you not asking?
Right.
I,
Well,
I mean,
so, well, the
and
next. Go ahead.
I think the only difference is that most people are not consenting to the.
Right. Well, I mean, the next question that we have is, how do traditional martyrs sacrifice themselves in a way that makes it so they, but yeah, like you were saying, like, and based on like the martyrs that like the in history that we mentioned before, like they, like their status as a martyr was not achieved until like after their deaths, technically. Like it
Right,
was like their death was the catalyst that led to martyrdom.
right. They died.
And it.
They literally die for their efforts.
Absolutely. Now, when it comes to like individually, like I think there is far more subtlety when it comes to martyrdom that we will talk about here in a little bit. So, how does the idea in abstract apply psychologically to the individual when talking about the martyr complex?
Um,
I think sometimes, and I think this is an extension of what we talked about before, but I think sometimes people martyr themselves because they think it's giving them a sense of safety or security, or it's, in their opinion, kind of controlling other people's perception of them
mhm.
in some fashion.
That's very true. Yeah. I think that what they do is, yeah, what they're trying to do is it is a sense of control, isn't it? Because like,
Hmm.
um, when you're playing victim, or when you're it's topping from the bottom, isn't it? Because what you're doing is like you're kind of like telling people like, oh, I'm this poor innocent victim.
Hmm.
You're abusing me. Like you're I'm 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 just this saintly person
But
who has
despite you
never
doing
done
this,
anything wrong. And so you're,
right.
you're trying to control the narrative. You're trying to make them these abusers, and you're not this.
Well, so here's an interesting juxtaposition. Like, I see a lot of, if we talk about like conversations like surrounding race, right? Especially in educational contexts, like I often see a lot of white people, if something is pointed out to them, they will immediately martyr themselves to the extent where they twist the conversation to make it seem like you're the one being racist when you're simply talking about race as a systemic issue, right? That's just a recent example that I can think of. Um, Oh, RP thinks that we're hilarious, and RP says, Ari, I know we're not super close, but you're a rock star in my book.
Oh my God, you guys are
Ari, you are a
filling us
rock
with these
star.
compliments. I'm just like, I'm exploding with such gratitude right now.
We're rock stars. Can I be Stevie Nicks and you can be. Ooh, which rock star would you be?
Oh, so did that make us Fleetwood Mac if you're Stevie Nicks? Can we be
We
like the
could.
good part of like Fleetwood Mac though?
Oh, you can be Alanis Morissette. There we go.
Oh my goodness. Can we both be Stevie Nicks? Like versions of
Yes.
Stevie Nicks? Like
Sometimes I dream of having an aesthetic similar to Stevie Nicks.
the White Witch, yes.
Flowy and gardeny, yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was very much a, oh, Lagiacra says, both of you are very metal. Okay.
Can we be metal Stevie Nicks?
Well, if we're going to be metal, then I'm going to be Amy Lee from Evanescence, because that's just...
Oh my god. So I'll be Stevie Nicks because then I'll be like cottagecore, like witchy, and then you can be Amy Lee from Evanescence.
You know what? We just figured it out. We just figured out the world's problems by determining our metal personas. Oh my god.
Where did
So
we go? Did we fall down the rabbit hole? Let's come back to this.
Alice, where are we? Let's talk about martyrdom in relationships. So, have you ever dealt with a person who martyrs themselves? Are you one of those people who martyrs themselves, or both?
This was part of my 20s. So the thing about it was the problem was I was in abusive relationships. So the thing about it is that I played victim because I put myself in abusive situations. So I was like, oh, poor me, I'm in these toxic abusive relationships, what can I do to get myself out of these relationships, or what can I, I'm doing all this and I'm giving myself all to these people. And so, there was a bit of like martyr complex of like, oh, I'm just the most innocent person in the world. And these big bad bullies, are always bullying up on me. And the thing about it is coming into my 30s, like it doesn't work like that. Like there's no true villain and there's no
Mhm.
true victim. It's a matter of like more complexity than that
Yeah.
like, I wasn't always so innocent and they weren't always so evil. It's in a relationship, it's all about give and take. And then, sometimes I'm the bad guy and sometimes they're the good guy and sometimes they're the bad guy and sometimes, but
Yeah.
it's maybe they do have narcissistic tendencies and they do have more instances of being toxic behavior, but it takes two to tango in a relationship.
It's so true. It's so true. So for me, I would argue that it started when I was in like middle school and high school.
Hmm.
I was bullied so much to the point where like I I used martyrdom as like a form of self-deluding,
Hmm.
where I would think that, oh, I'm being bullied for a reason and it's because I'm a good person and I'm staying steadfast to who I am as a person, and bullying is testing that,
Hmm.
and I need to be tested.
Yeah.
That was kind of like toward the tail end of like me being very religious. So like I also was like praying the gay away like at
Oh
the same
goodness.
time. And so like that was kind of like part of it too. Like maybe God's testing me. Maybe my fortitude is being assessed for some greater purpose, right? And did it help me survive? No. Like in the moment it was like a convenient thing to tell myself
Yeah.
that made me feel like it gave me like the specter of survival. It gave me like the facade of like, oh, I'm getting through this. But really, it was just that kind
It was
of
it was a band-aid on a very inconvenient situation.
right. And then, so as I grew older, I think I mean, in combination with the bullying and the martyrdom, like I really became very vulnerable to any form of criticism, to the point where like I would crumble, or like even like I would like martyr myself to just kind of shut down a conversation if somebody was like bullying me or being rude to me or even providing meaningful feedback to me, like because there are instances where people are providing you meaningful feedback, right?
Yeah. And that's the problem is that like when you martyr yourself, it's sort of like it 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 becomes everything becomes flatlined like
Yeah.
it's that and I would talk about like self-deprecation comes into play with the martyr complex like you know when you're self-deprecating yourself or like when you're flattening everything flattens out and sort of like you like you want to create a situation in which you what am I trying to say here?
I think I know
um,
where you're going. You're talking about creating a situation where you feel like you're on a level playing field, but what you're actually doing is kind of controlling the playing field.
but the thing about it is, it's like what it is you're trying to make a life for yourself in which things you have these complex relationships where there's a lot more to life, but you're trying to simplify things, and
Mm-hmm.
I think it's because of the trauma that you're trying to simplify things. So like by saying bad things about yourself, you're doing it so you do it before they do.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's sort of like by martyring yourself, you're doing it because um, the bullies are attacking you. So it's sort of like if I become the victim, and I
Oh.
because you've got that victim mentality in your brain, it's sort of like the self-deprecation kind
Huh.
of goes into that martyr. It's like
Yeah.
I've got this victim mentality, this learned helplessness, and so because it's sort of like because I've been bullied, because I've been mistreated, that it's almost like this learned instinct of I'm going to martyr myself before they get a chance to actually bully me into submission.
Wow. I never thought of it like that. See, it's interesting because we do that because we place more value and power in other people's voices, and to have somebody else do the bullying, it
Hmm.
destroys us more than us saying the words to ourselves on behalf of that person.
Right,
Ooh, and honestly still kind of do that today too.
right.
Because and mind you, I never discovered any of this stuff until I started therapy over the pandemic. But no, I'll scratch that. I knew of its existence. Like there was like a flicker of the idea in my mind because of, prior relationships, and I kind of began observing my behavior. Like my prior relationships, like for a while through the mid 2010s, like I was like skipping between relationships, not really making any deep connections. Some of it was my fault, because like that would create a sense of martyrdom, because then it was me protecting myself from getting too close to people.
Right.
But
And
now that go
I think
ahead.
I think that's why white people do things like they'll create this martyr situation, is because they're feeling like a sense of attack. So like to kind of like insulate themselves from feeling like that they're being attacked, they'll martyr themselves before they can get that attack on them.
Right.
So because they're feeling vulnerable and they're feeling scared of being called a racist or being called out for their behavior, as a
Mm-hmm.
way of like preventing the criticism, or being called into action, or like doing that self-evaluation, they deflect and turn themselves into martyrs as a way of like making it so that they can keep that insulated self to them, because it's sort of like as a way of like deflection to keep themselves insulated, because there's a sense of fear.
And in their like warped reality, it's them maintaining their virtue in the situation when it's not really the case. It's like actually making it worse. So speaking of, vegan mama says like it's like one woman, the one woman in Tyler Perry's Why Did I Get Married? Yes, yes. And well, because we're vegan mama and I are in a book circle. We are reading the book Nice Racism by I always forget her first name, but I know her last name is D'Angelo. Um, Robin DiAngelo. There we go. But in that book, she talks about specifically like um, like white liberals, and how white liberals are often the first to kind of crumble in the if they are criticized, or if an educational moment is brought to them about racism, or maybe they are perpetuating racism in some way, like
Hmm.
they are the first to kind of create that sense of martyrdom.
Yeah.
because there is some warped belief that in doing so it deflects enough to kind of make it seem like they're maintaining their virtue.
Yeah.
So, okay, yeah, Robin DiAngelo, thank you.
Well,
No,
because
it's a very
there's that
interesting book.
fear,
I think
there's
everybody
that
should read
fear
it.
of being labeled racist. There's that fear, and the thing about it is that the unlearning is that everybody's racist. Everybody,
Mm-hmm.
we are in a white supremacist system. Everybody's racist.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody is a little bit racist. Everybody has racist tendencies. We all have our biases, and it's recognizing those biases and working with them. And
Right.
when somebody points them out, not getting defensive about it, just it recognizing that, hey, I have this blind spot. It's like it's everybody has a car. Every car has a blind spot. Looking on your car and saying, hey, I don't think you saw that thing there. And so you
Mm-hmm.
don't hit the thing knowing where the blind spot
Right.
is on the car.
No, yeah, exactly. And the thing is, like, nobody said that the work was going to feel good all the time, considering those of us who are white, cisgender, like um, we all have this conditioning. We are
Yeah,
very much conditioned because we are surrounded by like this group think
yeah,
that kind of, and we are surrounded by other people who martyr themselves too.
right.
That's very much kind of like a conditioning. Like if a difficult topic comes up, like people are so quick to martyr themselves
Hmm.
because it I think in their idea it kind of helps. They think they're reclaiming the power, they're maintaining their virtue, but they're also disarming the conversation,
Right.
which is extremely problematic. So
I think it's just that most white liberals are think that they're right. That's what it is.
mhm.
Is that because let me tell you a little story. I was at the Barnes and Noble today, and I was listening to a bunch of old folks. These are people probably in like their 60s and 70s. They were all playing mahjong. There's a couple of people like sitting around drinking coffee, but most of them were playing mahjong because my Barnes and Noble has a Starbucks, and they kind of treat it as like a third place. Um,
Mhm.
so they all just kind of like sit around and chat and do whatever. And I overheard these two old men drinking coffee, and this old guy was getting flustered. He was getting so angry. And he said, I'm so mad at someone's name, such and such. And I didn't hear this was the name of the person. He said, I have done more research and read more about euthanasia in Denmark than he has, and I should know. And I don't understand why he doesn't listen to my opinion and why he had to butt his opinion in on my situation. And I was like, heated, heated situation. And that's with white liberals is that they feel as though they have done more research and that they know everything about everything and that they are the epitome of experts on every situation and that they hold the authoritarian opinion and that everybody has to hold the same opinion as they do because they've done research, they've read books, they've read the
Mhm.
New York Times, which has informed them about their
Oh my
opinion.
god, the New York Times. Oh,
But
I read a
or the
Wikipedia
Washington Post,
article.
they've read the Post, they've read the New York Times, they've read the New Yorker, they've read Harper's Magazine, they've read all
Time
the books.
magazine.
But I'm saying that they've read about it, so they
Right.
know their opinion. Their opinion is well informed, and everybody has to have the same opinion as them.
The way you just said that broke.
I said it just like Trump. That's what I said.
Oh, the ultimate martyr when you think about it.
Absolutely.
Oh my god. So let's go through some comments. Tiffany says, I feel I've done that as well, but I've also self-deprecated because I truly did feel that way about myself. I think it becomes martyrdom when it's weaponized against people, to kind of like control a situation. Because like there are instances where I've done it both that way, but there are instances where I've self-deprecated because I truly do feel that way about myself, you know.
And like
Um,
I understand being an expert on something, but like when you're well read, the whole point is that when you have opinions, The whole point is that you're supposed to welcome debate. You're supposed to welcome
Mm,
other people sharing their opinions and giving you something to think about. Even if it's an uninformed opinion, that still gives you something to think about, even if it's from the other side, because even uninformed opinions give you something about what the common man thinks about the issue.
right. Absolutely. Lagiakra says, I've always wondered about my blind spots, but I've never been able to figure out all of them. I know I can be very judgmental and a bit aggressive at times with my ideals, but that's about it that I know. And
That's okay.
that's the
It's okay
case.
to
That's
have blind
okay.
spots.
Now, see, the thing is, like, I think where you're coming from is very refreshing because like you're not allowing those blind spots or the prospect of having blind spots to deter you from allowing yourself to be vulnerable like you just did by sharing that, right? Like I think we all like anybody with privilege, us included, right? We always have blind spots. And it's what we do when we discover those blind spots that matter. We can either choose to, learn about them and be like, okay, like, yeah, like maybe it doesn't feel good to learn about this, but, like, where does that sense of shame come from? Or we can kind of like martyr ourselves and weaponize that against other people, right?
Um,
Um,
Blaming yourself is kind of a form of self-deprecation. Just taking it as it comes, and if somebody points something out to you, not getting upset about it, not taking it negatively. It just depends on the situation, really. It is situational, but um, you know, I guess guilt can be form of martyring. I guess it just depends on the certain circumstance.
it depends on what you're doing with it, I think. At the end of the day, it depends on what we do like that like going back to the self-deprecation thing. I in the past have used self-deprecation as a means of fishing for compliments or getting attention,
Right.
you know in a way that's kind of martyring too because like I'm kind of you know sorry, there was a loud vehicle. I'm kind of like taking control of a situation by kind of like centering myself,
Right.
being like, Donnie needs a compliment now. And the truth is, I've done that. And I do that because of those years being bullied, being erased, being minimized. So now I'm at this point in my life where I have to do anything I can to be seen. And sometimes it's at my own expense because really it's just not coming off the way it should. Does that make
Although
sense?
sometimes you do need a compliment, and that's okay. The thing about it is, you're just like, I just need a compliment right now, Donnie. I would give you a compliment.
Ari, I do need a compliment.
Your hair looks amazing.
Oh, thank you.
It looks particularly shiny in like a good way,
Oh,
but like that
oh,
that you use really good shampoo.
thank you. Thank you. Vegan Mama says, we are a problem when we believe we have it all figured out and we don't still have things to learn. We all have room to learn, always. Absolutely. 1000%. That's why we're all here, because we just want to learn more. I think that's one of the reasons why we teach too. Like, we want to learn. Um, Tiffany says, I've done that too, Donnie. Vegan Mama says, one of the things I said in our book group this week is I studied race in grad school. I teach race classes. My best friend is black, but I still have more to learn.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Definitely. Tiffany says, Donnie, here's my compliment. You are a very soft, fluffy sweater, and I want to hug you with it. I love
That's
you
a
all.
perfect compliment. That's the best kind of compliment, Tiffany, especially coming from you. I know how much that means to you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. So, I mean, yes, self-deprecation does come into play. Um, and I think it's because just people feel shame. A lot of it does come down to shame when it comes to the subtle, like day to day interrelationship martyring, right? I mean, we'll probably do a part two to this episode at some other point and talk about um, martyring on a grand scale, like with the individual I mentioned a while ago, who we talked about in our current event snapshot. Let's see. Tiffany says, I agree. I definitely do not have it all figured out. In fact, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing.
Oh, but you fake it really well. You do such a good job.
I think an important step is even admitting that, right? Just even admitting that. Vegan Mama says, you two do an awesome job on the show. Thank
Oh, thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
I was so
We
full
view
of
it as
today.
we always have fun hangout times, and I think this is just an extension of what we love to do, right? Lagiakra says we must continue to research and learn all the time. Yes, I agree completely. And again, like sometimes it may not feel good to do so, but when we don't feel good about it, if we do feel shame, if we do feel this need to self deprecate, I think we should have like a list of questions that we jump into. Like, where does this feeling originate? Why am I feeling this way? What How should I respond to this feeling, and what could my potential responses do to the people around me?
Yeah.
Whether they are actively participating in the conversation or bystanders listening to the conversation. So, ooh, I'm nerding out now. So,
I love it. This is a great night. I had such a good night tonight.
this has been a great episode. Like, I'm really excited about this topic area. So, if we really pinpoint the damage that martyring does, and then we'll end the episode by talking about healing from martyr complexes. The damage that it does is one, it silences people. It kind of takes control of a social situation from people, especially if there are others in a situation who should be centered in the conversation.
It tries to insulate the person doing it from criticism, and so because what it is, it tries to keep because what you're doing is you're victimizing yourself before somebody can criticize you, and so like you're just causing this insulated bubble around you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So like it can cause damage, right? So
Mm-hmm.
and there are just some instances, like I know for example, like I have family members who, like, in light of, bringing up past trauma and stuff like that, even if they were the individuals who caused the trauma, like they will martyr themselves and make it seem like, well, they'll gaslight you first and then martyr themselves being like, well, I was dealing with my own journey, or I like my own issues. And it's like, yeah, I get that, but we all make choices.
Right.
Choices are choices.
Well, and it just what it is, it removes focus from somebody. It kind of it sort of plays into a little bit of narcissism too, in my opinion, because what
Kind
it
of.
is it removes focus from like the whole situation and kind of places it on them. Because you know what I mean? Like it kind of
Yeah.
removes focus from the situation. And it's like, oh, aren't I such a victim?
Well, and mind you, like I remember, I remember having relationships where, like, sometimes they were abusive, but other times, like, I would also martyr myself to the extent where I would kind of self sabotage the relationship,
Right.
and it would just not work out. So, there are so many different ways that martyrdom can manifest itself. Um, and if we move into talking about healing from having a martyr complex, I think part of it is simply recognizing those moments when it comes into play. I would have never recognized that until I had therapy, where I was kind of able to examine like my behaviors. Well, first examine my trauma, understand how the trauma led to those behaviors, and then realize how I would often act on those behaviors as a means to diffuse, to keep myself safe, minimize myself before other people would minimize me, even if it wasn't their intent to do so, right? Like
I think
all
the
sorts of
biggest,
things.
yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that is that making myself the victim before other people can do it to me. It's a form of insulation, but it's also like needing that attention, and because it's feeling inadequate about myself, and
Yeah.
and not getting proper support and not feeling like I'm getting proper support, but not getting proper positive attention, um, and making myself the victim or making myself
Mm-hmm.
the center focus, because it's sort of for me it kind of manifested in things like pick me behavior, but also like martyrdom. And it's always like it's just kind of always being too much. I always felt like I was
Yeah,
too much in a situation in that aspect.
same.
And it's like
Ooh,
it's
I like that you mentioned the pick me aspect too. Like we could do a whole episode on that, like being a pick me person, because I've
oh
been there
man.
too.
I have it was my early 20s, that I exhibited a lot of this behavior, a lot of pick me attitudes, a lot of martyrdom complexes. It was just like a lot of early 20 somethings when I just, you know, that I didn't have a lot of female friends because I always thought that, because I was a tomboy, so I always thought, hey, I thought rather hang out with the guys. And
Mm-hmm.
so being around women, it was hard because there was always like that pitting against each other. But there's a sense of like being around women, I needed that to martyr myself because it was sort of like I needed to center focus myself because I was like insulating myself from possible criticism about my behaviors.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I really connect with that too. I think so. Going like looking at like the way we heal, like I think it's ongoing. Like I'm still healing from that,
Hmm.
honestly. And therapy has helped. Learning how to, focus on, the good things, knowing how to pinpoint those behaviors. In fact, something funny, my therapist the other day instructed me to keep a journal of good things people say to me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I was like, I've never thought of that. Like, because like when I journal, I'm always like honing in on like the things that like the bad things people say. And she was like, no, whenever somebody says something really great to you, I want you to write it down. Like, I want you
Oh,
to write it down. I
wow.
want you to underline it. So I'm gonna start doing that, and I'm gonna see if that helps me. And I think it will. I think
Well,
it
and the
will.
and the last thing about the healing process, honestly, is that we think that we're static beings and that our personalities are always just this one, set behavior. But honestly, we can grow and learn and change and become more than what we are at one point in life, and that we can become bigger and better than we were yesterday.
That is the perfect way to wrap up. Honestly. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. This has been such a fun conversation. Per the usual, don't forget to click like on this video for the algorithm, please. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you have not yet. Also, please subscribe to Ari's channels, Strange Nothings, Tarot Time with Ari, and Boocha Baby.
By Water Channel.
We love you all so much, and we will see you again next week. Have a good rest of your night. Bye.
Bye.